As we take a quick look at one of NS's conversion units, we are stepping back to September of 2024, right before Hurricane Helene struck, in which damaged a large portion of the former Clinchfield and severed through traffic on the Big Sandy. One afternoon, CSX 1871 led M692, in which we head for the former CNO to give chase. This is Railfan Micah Turner as we follow the ACL on the Big Sandy Subdivision. What you're hearing blow in the distance is M69205 with 1871 Atlantic Coastline leading. Here we go. Check out the Elkhorn City Railroad Museum there. We've barely beat it down here. We caught NS 1800 there a minute ago, over at Tom's Creek near Coburn, Virginia, and from there we booked it back to the Clinchfield for this one. There's a lot of trains out here today, so we're having us a good old Railfan adventure. I can hear that train a-coming, and it's about to come around the bend. There it is. Let's go. After bridging the gap between the old C&O and Clinchfield meeting grounds, M692 clears Elkhorn City, where we then jump ahead to Marrowbone as they prepare to enter the yard at Shelby. Once at Shelby, we head for the midpoint of the yard, also known by locals as the sawmill. It wasn't long before the ACL rolled past as it prepared to set out one of the engines in their consist, something we will take a look at next. After setting out their engine, 1871 heads back to its train engine light. The ACL, or Atlantic Coastline, was a railroad mostly utilized along the eastern coast in accompanying states. Officially formed in 1871, the railroad began their rail service in 1900 and did so until merging along with the Seaboard Airlines to form the Seaboard Coastline in 1967. The SCL would later fall in and merge with names such as the L&N and Georgia Road to form the Family Line system in 1972, which would then become the Seaboard system in 1982, and finally merge with the Chessie system in 1986 to form CSX. In November of 2023, as a part of their ongoing heritage program, CSX unveiled the 1871 in Waycross, Georgia, as the 7th locomotive in the series. One noticeable difference with the 1871, however, was that the unit did not sport the fade between the cab and the paint job like the 6 previously released locomotives, and would spark the trend that would last for the remainder of the series. We had caught the 1871 on one of its first trips in December of 2023 and had this opportunity to see it lead in September of 2024. As the unit reunited with its train and received a fresh crew, M652 would then arrive into the yard on the main. With their new crew on board, the 1871 is now the sole leader and departs Shelby en route to Russell. We moved down to the old C&O cantilever signal set at Ford's Branch and watched as the train rolled through. The Big Sandy is the last C&O main line to retain their classic signal sets, though with an anticipated traffic increase once the Clinchfield reopens later this year, many of them are now being replaced. This also includes the last C&O signal bridge at CP Bob's near Paintsville, a location we will take a look at in an upcoming video. We then ran ahead of M692 and awaited its arrival at the east end of Poly, where we would then pace the train through to the west end. This is one of my favorite locations to film pace shots, so I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. With the train rolling to a stop at Wagner Siding, we knew something had to be coming south, or by Big Sandy terms, an eastbound. First up is E903, in which will slow to a crawl to allow the local trainmaster to step down and board the cab of the 1871 for the ride back to Russell.
You're going to ride back.
That is E903 meeting M692 at Wagner. Talk about a cool meet. Now, let's wait on that B651. As I mentioned, behind the E903 was B651, an ethanol train from Chicago bound for Charlotte, North Carolina. Once he clears, M692 will throttle up and head west. wrapped up our chase of M692 and soon after caught wind over the scanner that it was now B651's turn to wait for an oncoming westbound, the M652 we seen roll into Shelby earlier. Back at the west end of Polly, we set up for our last catch of the day as the two trains met. Thank you all so much for tuning in to this Railfan Micah Turner adventure. Even with the Clinchfield outage, the past years still sported its fair share of interesting trains and units to traverse the Big Sandy, one such train of which we will take a look at in the next video. If you liked what you've seen, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one. Until next time, from the coalfields, this is Railfan Micah Turner. God bless y'all. For those of you who stick around to the very end, you may notice I sometimes leave bloopers or Easter eggs for your entertainment.